Thank you so much. It's good to have all of you here. My name is Dan Biggs, Congressman from Arizona's 5th Congressional District. I'm so happy that you would take time out of your schedule and join us for our teletown hall tonight. We're trying to do these a little bit more often while so many folks have been homebound for the last few weeks. And I'm grateful that you would take time and to join me tonight. We're going to take some questions after I do a short monologue. And so if you want to get into the queue for questions, please press *3. That's *3 for questions. And again, I just say, if you want to get in line to ask questions, please press *3. We'd love to have an opportunity to take your questions tonight. I want to just cover a few areas before we get into the question portion of this. We have seen a lot of very interesting things. Our heart goes out to those who have fallen ill and the families of those who've succumbed to the coronavirus. It's a tragedy, and we, everybody in my office, and I know in the country, we reach out and extend our condolences to those of you who lost loved ones. I also express my gratitude very much to those who are working with the most vulnerable populations, those who, the elderly, those who have additional health problems. We are grateful for those who are providing elder care, those who provide medical care and treatment. We're grateful to the first responders who work so hard and take risks on a day-in, day-out basis on behalf of so many of our community, those people who live in our great district. One of the things that has come up repeatedly as I've been reaching out to members of our community daily is this, and what we've seen around the country is this, some very serious infringement upon what are our God-given rights that have been recognized and enshrined in the Constitution of the United States. I will point out that, for instance, on Easter Sunday, there was a church in California that was practicing social distancing, wearing masks, etc., and police in tactical gear came and shut that down and arrested some. We've seen other incidents where people were doing drive-through churches and were given citations, and these types of things are important to understand because America, it was founded to be a free nation, and everybody's intended to be free, and the restrictions on those freedoms really are supposed to be of the most narrow nature, and quite frankly, we look to government to actually preserve and protect those rights. That's what the purpose of government is for. And in about 6 weeks ago, America was at certainly the best economy in my lifetime, and perhaps some of the best in the last 100 years since perhaps the Roaring '20s. And we came to a complete jump stop, and with that stop, we've now have, over the last 4 weeks, more than 22 million Americans out of work. And if we don't open up the economy soon, there's anticipated that we might have even more, maybe even as many as 30 million people out of work come the end of April. That would be truly another tragedy. We see small businesses being closed, some maybe permanently. In many cases, this can be very, very difficult. We know that people who have retirement savings or savings that have been in the market have had tremendous losses. Those who've invested in businesses that are shut down may have spent their life savings and lost it. These are also critical problems, and these kind of shelter-in-place problems and the economic woes that we're under now in this recession produces additional societal problems and health problems. Suicide hotline calls are way up. Domestic violence increases. child abuse. We have additional problems with alcoholism and drug use. There's pathologies that go on. Right now in Arizona, we know that particularly our rural hospitals are in a tremendous financial crunch. Even with the Phase 3 federal relief package that came out that recently sent $30 billion to hospitals throughout the nation. We know that hospitals in Arizona in particular are very distressed, particularly outside the Phoenix metro area. So we need to keep these things in our minds as we go and try to rally around who we are as Americans and the very essence of America. So again, I'd urge you to press *3 for questions, and I'll just go through a couple more quick points. President Trump and Vice President Pence have done in my opinion, a pretty stellar job in trying to lead this country through this public health emergency. It's very difficult. There are so many pressing things happening in there, and our economy and our society and our healthcare system. All of these things are so complex. They've done a pretty good job, I feel, in trying to usher us through that, guide us through it. It was announced today that I'm part of President Trump's congressional task force on reopening the American economy. We had our first conference call on that today, led by President Trump and Vice President Pence. And we are going to try to work through that and see what we can do to get this economy up, get our society up, and still protect the public health. These things are very important. Last weekend, I sent a letter to the administration with some friends about protecting religious freedom. You know, you start talking about the First Amendment, you're talking about freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of association, freedom of the press. These things are fundamental to who we are, and we have to recognize worship is not only a right, but think of it. Some of the pathologies, social pathologies that we go through in a crisis like this, they can be met by religious, practice, and that's a great thing. And I'm continuing to urge folks to open up today. We know grocery stores are open. I had to go to the bank today. That's open. Everyone's practicing. That's open, or practicing safe social distancing and some very strong measures to try to stop the community spread of this disease. And that, quite frankly, is, I think, possible at all kinds and at all levels of our community. And we've got all kinds of businesses that need to be opened up, and that could open up and still take care of the most vulnerable in our society. And I think that's important. And with that, it's now time for us to open up. And I'll just remind you again, *3 for questions. We're going to go to Terry in Chandler. Terry, are you there?
Can you hear me? Yes?
Yes, I can hear you now. Hi, Terry.
Hi. Thank you, Congressman, for your leadership, and congratulations on your recent appointment. I think that that's going to be critical because Arizona has been leading and doing those progressive steps to help overcome this terrible situation that we're in. My biggest question is with SBA and funding, everything got shut down. These businesses are still reeling from, they are not prepared yet. Some of them may not open. On that next round of funding, how are we going to make sure that we keep politics out of it and just get the money in the hands of our small business?
Terry, thanks for asking that question, and thanks for what you do in the community. I really appreciate it, and I'm grateful for your service. And let me just tell you that right now, for the last 10 days now, there's been a move to try to replenish the Paycheck Protection Program, which is the small business loan program and the number that the administration has asked for is $250 billion. But the Senate, again, today, for the third session in the last 10 days, there's been an objection on the part of the minority party of the Senate, the Democrats, because they want to expand and go beyond that. They have all kinds of other ideas they want to get in there. And that's the problem that we're having, Terry, right now, is that the Senate is ready. I think the House is, at least the Republicans in the House are ready to make that vote, but we can't get to the vote because Mitch McConnell is trying to do what's called a unanimous consent vote a week ago Thursday, last Monday, and then again today, and the Democrats have objected and blocked that. So that's what's happening, and you're asking, I think, a very legitimate question, and we're going to see what happens. We're going to. My sources in the Senate tell me they're going to try to do this again on Monday, and if it goes on Monday, then I would anticipate that the House will try to get it out on Tuesday. I think we need to let folks in Congress know how very much this is needed. You can't, you have to really make that voice loud and clear. And then I'll add this to it, Terry. We need to get back to D.C. Congress itself needs to reopen so we can do the business of the people. Quite frankly, if we were all there, and the Speaker were to open up the House again for regular business, I believe this would have happened already, for good or ill. It would have already been done. But that's really where we are. So I'm sorry that I can't give you better news, but I wanted to give you accurate news. So again, Terry, thanks so much. Appreciate very much the call and what you do in the community. And we're going to go to the next question, and that's going to be from Harry in Mesa. Hi, Harry.
Hi, Congressman. Thanks for taking my call. I've been listening to Brett Baer yesterday on a special report, and he's provided a lot of insight as to the origins of this COVID-19, and it seems to emanate from that biological lab in Wuhan, China. My question is, and you probably don't have an answer, but China needs to be held accountable for this. Look at the damage that they've done to our country, to the lives that are lost, not only in our country, but the entire world. And if I were a head of state for any country, anywhere in the world, I'd be upset as hell, and I'd be bringing this forth in the United Nations, and I would do anything and everything to punish China as harshly as possible, just short of war. That's how strongly I feel.
Well, Harry, thank you. Thanks for calling in tonight. Thanks for your point and your question. So I want to tell you what Congress should be doing, and some of us have proposed should happen. So the Speaker has said she's not going to call us back in. We just got something a couple of days ago saying they're not even going to. They don't want to bring Congress back until May 4th. Well, it is things like this, Harry, the point that you made that I think are so critical. So some I'm a Republican, so I got to say that some on the Republican side, I've talked to the ranking members. Now we're in the minority in the House, and the House is basically controlled by the Speaker. She controls how that process goes. But our suggestion is, our advocacy is that we, even if the Democrats won't let us, we should be having some hearings on everything from what's going on with the attack on religious liberties to the issue that you raised. What did China know? What do we know about what China knew? And how do we resolve the issue that you raised? I will tell you that as we look through this, we see things like 90% of our pharmaceuticals are made in 80 different countries. Do we need to do something to incentivize bringing that supply chain back to the United States? Yes. Almost all of our gowns, surgical gowns, are made in Malaysia, over 90%. We need to do something about that. But there are so many things that we need to look at, including your point, which is how do you hold China accountable? And they need to be held accountable. They still there are many who have indicated to me very strongly that China is still not fully forthcoming about where they are in their processes. And I will just tell you, at one point they would not let us even have any more than 2 of our NIH CDC folks over there at any one time. That's problematic. We need to be able to have access, get over there and see what's going on. We have the best scientists in the world here, and they would be able to give us some great advice and understanding, which might have helped bring this to end much sooner. So, Harry, great point, great question. I thank you for calling. We're going to go next to Carol. Carol, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Yes.
Yeah.
My question, Congressman Biggs, is just exactly who decided that only, it seems, I know there's a whole group that advise the president, but 2 major people seem to be calling all the shots. I know they're supposed to be doctors. My husband was a physician, and then we were married for well over 50 years before he went to be with the Lord. I'm a nurse. I do consider either of those people doctors, like my husband was a doctor, with a heart and a spirit for people and for the big picture and for taking care of people. Totally. Big picture. Not just through test tubes and in labs. I'm sorry, Representative Biggs, but I go a little bit crazy. These things they do every day make me so crazy I can't watch them anymore.
Well, Carol, you don't need to apologize. Yeah, you don't need to apologize. I mean, so your question is a fair question. Of course, Dr. Fauci is an epidemiologist from the National Institute of Health, and Dr. Birx has a history as well in this area. They've both been employed by the federal government for more than 30 years. They have an announced expertise in this area. One of the issues that I have had is similar to yours, in that Dr. Fauci has said, and I've heard many briefings, not just 1 or 2, regular briefings from Dr. Fauci that he's given to Congress in and of itself, where he's said that the models that they've used on have been unreliable. He doesn't trust the models that they use, and why wouldn't he? Because they've had to be readjusted. Then he's also said that they haven't taken anything else into account. No societal issues related to shelter in place or economic deterioration. None of the mental health issues. None of that was taken into account. They were looking solely at trying to prevent basically a community spread. And I understand that there's a certain logic to that, but I just feel like we should have had a more rounded, multiple groups of people in there from all kinds of areas that were going to be impacted, so that we could talk about that and how we could protect the most vulnerable. Because by the time this was really starting to develop in the United States, we've had a pretty good idea who the most vulnerable populations were, and so different nations have approached this in different ways. And quite frankly, we might have done something a bit differently, which might have had a completely different outcome. But Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx really have had, quite frankly, an outsized role in this, and so has the model from the UK statistician as well. And we have great epidemiologists at Stanford that have contradicted Dr. Fauci and other institutions around the country. So it would be nice to have a good dialogue between those types of folks, so we might get a little bit more balanced. But your question was fair. It's a good question, and I hopefully have addressed at least how this developed. And so I think the president got involved with brought in the personnel that he had at the National Institute of Health. We're going to go next to Steve in Chandler. Steve.
Yes, Congressman Biggs. My question is there a forecast for Arizona as far as when we would reach peak infections and, unfortunately, a death rate? And the second part would be, what would be the associated financial loss in respect to job losses for the state of Arizona? Thank you.
Yeah, Steve, thank you. Okay, so that's let me see if I can. The modeling from that has been used in the Department of Health Services and amongst medical workers and medical professionals that I've talked to shows that the peak hitting sometime in the next week to 10 days. We don't have a real number. I can't give you a number of what that would be as far as the number of cases detected, the case fatality rate. But I will tell you that the news that I heard today is that it looks like, at least from yesterday, and this isn't always indicative because it's just 2 days, but today it looks real similar, real flat compared to yesterday. So we may get there sooner than was modeled. We'll have to wait and see. The models haven't proven to be really accurate, but yesterday and today look a little bit flat compared to each other. And yesterday, of course, was kind of the high, and so if today matches it and tomorrow's the same, and you actually might get there sooner rather than later, which would be great. Now, what is the impact on us as far as lost jobs? Lost jobs in Arizona last week was, I want to say, something like 350,000 total jobs. I haven't seen this week's figure. We think that they're actually low because there's been kind of a surge at unemployment claims, and we just haven't had the personnel to process all of those claims rapidly as they've come in. That's my understanding. Some ways to think about this is we probably will lose 30 to 40% of our restaurants, and this all has a cascading effect. So if you shut down all your restaurants and you do 10%, 15%, 20% of what you normally would, that means that your food distributors also are going down as far as employment and activity, and that means that because that's got your truckers and the people who are bringing the food from the food warehousing and from the food processing and manufacturing plants, which is why, if you're paying attention, you're going to see in some places they're pouring milk out on the ground because they don't have a way to get them into the gallon, half-gallon jugs, which would get them to a supermarket because they normally do. Their processing takes them to much bigger containers to distribute. Same thing in eggs and poultry and you know, what's your pipeline for beef? What's your pipeline for vegetables? We're looking pretty good. All of this deals long range. All of this has cascading effects. So if you've got a restaurant that's had to close, they can't make their rent. So they can't make their rent. That means you got a landlord that can't pay the investors, whether it's a bank or whoever's lent them money to buy that property. So you have a cascading effect in that sector as well. So I could just go on and list because I'm talking to different sectors regularly, all day long, every day. I'm talking to individuals and constituents trying to find out what's going on with them, trying to see if there's ways we can help out. Steve, I really appreciate the question and your insight. I think there's no way to adequately predict how this will, when we'll turn this around. My opinion is we should be opening sooner rather than later, and that we should be advocating for people to safely patronize their local businesses. That's what we really need to help stanch the tide of lost jobs and lost capital. And so with that, and I think we can do it safely as well. So thank you very much, Steve. Appreciate the call. Next, we're going to go to John.
Good evening, Congressman Biggs.
Hi, John. Thanks for calling in today.
Thank you for having my call. Did you hear my fielded question?
I did not hear your question. If you want to ask it, I'm happy to take it.
Yes, sir. I am asking about the guarantees that we have through our Constitution and Bill of Rights. Precedence is being set as we go through this, national emergency. And some of our rights have been suspended, and, for maybe some good reasons. But as they reopen our government, I am very well aware of what we've lost, and we shouldn't lose anything when they bring back the economy. And my concern is for that, and then for the $2 trillion that our government has given us, and thank you, but are we bankrupt? How are we going to be financially solvent? You just can't print money because you can.
Okay. John, two great questions. Let me address those. Your first question with regard to constitutional rights in the emergency, I couldn't agree more. I am extremely disheartened that 6 weeks ago, no American, or at least very few Americans, would have tolerated the attacks on our constitutional rights like we've grown accustomed to in the last 2-3 weeks. And I keep kind of a file as I come across these, and as constituents call me, etc. This is absolutely reprehensible, and one of my biggest concerns, John, is like yours, is that as we see an erosion of rights in an emergency, do they stay gone? Do we bring them back? Do people acquiesce casually over time? Those things really bother me. So let's talk about religious liberty for a moment. That's a huge issue, and Attorney General Barr sent out a letter recently talking about the fundamental nature of religious liberty, and all throughout our history, if there was to be an abrogation of rights, it was to be the least onerous path. It was to be the temporary and the least oppressive of restriction of rights. You had to try to provide every opportunity for people to exercise their rights. I'm just concerned as anything that hasn't happened here. And what I will throw a couple of other things out there that maybe some folks hadn't heard, but I am really concerned with this notion of trying to make people carry some kind of health certification card that you've either had a vaccination from for the coronavirus, or you have had it and you're immunized because you've already had it. This is the wrong way to go. This notion that Dr. Fauci is talking about, where you have contact tracing, where the government can keep an eye on you and see who you're coming into contact with, this type of thing is absolutely dystopian in nature and certainly antithetical to America's notion of who we are as a free people. What makes America so great is we understand we have freedoms from God. We respect those freedoms, and we respect them in other people as well. And so that's really disheartening to me. So I'm glad to hear that you're concerned about that as well. And the DOJ, Department of Justice, should be investigating wherever there's an abrogation of these rights. The states, I believe in federalism. I believe that the governors should govern their states. But where they take away the constitutionally guaranteed rights of American citizens, that's where the Department of Justice needs to get involved. That's for sure. And the other question you asked was actually very prescient as well, where you said, look, we just gave out $2.2 trillion that we don't have. How will we be solvent? Are we bankrupt? So I want to just provide context. I don't mean to be a kind of a rain cloud here. I'm actually very bullish and optimistic that if we can get our economy open, we can maybe turn things around. But here's the way to think about it. Phases 1, 2, and 3 of these relief packages actually exceed $2.5 trillion. Before we ever got to the coronavirus, when our economy was humming along so well, we had already incurred well over $1 trillion of structural deficit for 2020. And that's with more tax revenue than at any time in the history of the country, because we have more tax revenue. We just have spent more. And nobody believes that we're not going to spend any more money between now and the end of September, which is our fiscal year. We're looking at having a structural deficit in excess of $4 trillion for 2020. And that means that we have to get that money somewhere. That means we got to borrow it. It means we're just going to print money. And that means that we're going to be $27 to $28 trillion in national debt by the end of this current fiscal year. And if you take our total gross national debt and compare it to our gross domestic product, which is all the products we produce, the values of our exchanges, we will exceed that enormously. It'll be about 108 to 110%, maybe higher, on our total gross national product, especially if we can't get the economy open sooner. And by the way, there are voices saying we should stay closed in some respects all the way to 2022. I heard that today by some leaders. This is irresponsible. Just as the virus can cause health issues and actually take people's lives, same with poverty and depression. And I don't mean emotional depression. I'm talking about economic depression. It stunts people's ability to get health care, etc. So more specifically to your point, we need to be much more careful about how we approach our budgeting at the federal level, John, and I appreciate you so much raising that question to me. We're going to go next now to, before I do that, I want to remind you, we're going to go to *3 for questions. *3 if you want to get in line for questions. We're going to go now to Elizabeth in Queen Creek.
Good evening, Congressman Biggs. Thank you very much for taking your time with us tonight.
My pleasure.
I'm a very small business owner in Queen Creek in engineering, product development, and prototyping. The majority of our projects have been placed on hold, so we applied for PPP. Mm-hmm. As of today, our application is in underwriting, and we understand that with the current news, our loan grant probably won't be funded this go-round. However, just today, we've received 7 emails to 3 of our business addresses, purportedly from the SBA, requesting additional information. We've mentioned our pending application. They're very authentic looking, citing an actual IRS form for financial reporting required to move the application forward. It's a phishing scam with an attachment that contained a virus. We know that SBA does not contact business owners directly.
That's right. That's right.
Later in the day, we received, this is just today, we received an email from our bank, which is BBVA Compass, that was addressed to someone we'd never heard of, but was forwarded through to our info account. Again, it referred to our pending application. We contacted the bank by phone, and they said, oops, we have a very strong security on our email through Network Solutions. And so these nefarious characters really know how to work around internet and email security. I would just like to advise everyone we must all be on our guard. It's just a warning to please be very careful and look extremely carefully at anything that comes into you purporting to be from the SBA. And again, I just want to thank you for your outstanding leadership, sir, and for giving me the opportunity to be heard.
Elizabeth, thank you so much. I know we've talked before, Elizabeth. Thank you so much for giving us that information. And I've made a note for us to contact, me and my staff to contact our State Attorney General and the Department of Justice. This is really driving me crazy because I'm hearing of people who are trying to work out a second mortgage or a refinance, and the same thing is happening. And this is, man, it is one of the most reprehensible things in my mind that when we're going through an economic downturn, excuse me, you've got people who are so despicable that they're going to try to take advantage of people. And I would just caution, not just like in Elizabeth's situation where you're going through a community bank and the SBA is backing that information, because she's right. You're working with the bank. You're not working with the SBA technically on this. Please be careful. I would do the same thing for any of our friends and constituents out there who are engaged in any of these federal programs. That's why we had Mark Brnovich on when we did our teletown hall just a week or two ago to talk about these very issues, because these things tend to really spike up when the economy's in distress by people trying to take advantage of their neighbors. That's really a shame. But I'm glad you knew about it, and I appreciate the warning to all of our friends. Let a word of warning to the wise be sufficient. So, thank you. We're going to go next to Joseph in Gilbert.
Hi, Congressman Biggs.
Yeah, Joseph. Thanks for calling.
Good. How are you?
Fantastic.
Congratulations. Good. Congratulations on your appointment to the President's Committee on Getting the Country Running Again.
Thank you.
Quick question I had. One of my questions was already answered, so thank you for that to one of the first callers that were in there. My second question is what I'm really concerned about. I'm a senior, okay? And my biggest concern is, of course, it's important to open up the state and open up the country to the businesses and stuff like that. But as I go to the stores here in Arizona and stuff like that, I still see people not wearing face masks, not following the 6-foot rule. And as a senior who's had a pneumonia, has had bronchitis, who's had valley fever, my biggest concern is I do not want to get this virus, and I'm concerned that we haven't tested enough and we don't have treatment enough in place in order to reopen the economy. And I want to know, as our representative, what are you going to do to ensure that before we open up the economy?
Hey, great question, Joseph. I really appreciate it. And I would just say, first of all, folks, really, as you're going out and I get out, I got to get out, go grocery shopping too, and take care of items of interest and that I need to take care of. We really need to practice the guidelines. It's not mandatory here. I don't think it should be mandatory, but I think we, as a free people, should be responsible enough and really take care to do that. Now, your question really is about testing and treatment. So testing is being developed, and these kits are coming out faster and faster, but there's just, it's been woefully inadequate. And I don't mean to be, I'm not trying to be critical about that. It just hasn't been enough. We've done, I've lost the number in my head, but well over a million. We've done more tests in the United States than has been done in any other country in the world by far. But it just isn't simply enough. So one of my ideas has been, quite frankly, is we want to protect our most vulnerable. particularly those living in senior facilities and assisted living facilities, and so we need people who care for them to be able to get lots of tests on a regular basis, and get that out. So the reality is we're just short of that, Joseph. And I'm not sure that we're going to see all of the amount of testing that I think all of us would like to see any time in the near future. We want more testing. Arizona needs more testing. We received a certain number of the Abbott Labs fast test machines. By the way, a lot of the medical providers here actually have Abbott machines that can actually do that kind of fast result testing. So I'm hoping that we're going to see even more of that going. Treatment. There is a need for more treatment out there. There's those who advocate for hydroxychloroquine, which is also necessary for lupus and other folks who take that. So the FDA is trying to streamline processes to get more of that going out. I want to talk about, because you kind of touched on it. It's you didn't touch on it, but it's part of this question, which is of what I would call personal protection equipment. The federal government has ordered over 500 million face masks. That heavy duty face mask, and they're out there. They're being produced now rapidly. We have an increase in production in a lot of these facilities, but we need more for gowns. We need more gloves, and we just need to make them more available. So that's part of it as well, Joseph, is to make sure that we've got the PPE in place for everyone that's around. So I appreciate your concern, and I would tell you, if you are concerned, you're right to stay in and make sure that you have your PPE when you're going out in public as well. So appreciate the question, Joseph. We're going to go next to Jane in East Mesa.
Hello. Hello.
Hi, Jane. How are you?
Well, we're fine, thank you. My husband and I had a couple of questions involving hospitals. We're wondering when hospitals will be able to take patients who don't just have coronavirus. We have a young cousin, age 16, who has brain cancer, and he can't get his surgery that he needs because the hospitals are not taking, they're saying it's non-essential, I guess. And then the second part of my question is, when we have famous and well-known and highly vetted doctors saying that we must stay home and that we can't go out, and that, and they don't seem to care how bad the economy is, what do you do in that case? I mean, I'm just kind of like, okay, so yeah. We can't go out. Now what? The economy is tanking.
Yeah. Jane, great questions. Let me tackle the first one as much as I can. I think I'm struggling with this notion where the hospitals were mandated largely throughout the country, not mandated, but they were advised not to do any elective surgery. And the reason is that there was this anticipated surge and you wanted to have these beds available for COVID-19 patients. But in the phone call that I had late last week, for instance, in ventilators, something like 2/3 of 65% I believe to 75% of our ventilators in Arizona are available. They're not being used. We have hospitals that in rural Arizona in particular that are in danger of closing because they relied on the revenue from doing the type of surgery that I believe your grandson or nephew, your 16-year-old with a brain cancer, have. They use that revenue to sustain other parts that don't produce much revenue. And my position has been, it should not be necessarily the government telling hospitals not to do this, but it should be the hospitals and the hospital administrators with their experienced medical professionals. After, they can get guidance from the feds and from the state, but they should make the decisions on where they go. I'm hoping, and I've been advocating for each hospital to be able to make its own determination based on available beds. We have hospitals, for instance, that really have more than 50% vacancy rate in beds and very little used ICUs because the surge has not hit us like it has in other places. It hasn't been good, but it hasn't been nearly as traumatic as it has been in other places. So I think that the hospitals should be told, you make the decision, you make the call, and we should trust them because they're experts they know what their inventory is on everything from personal protection equipment to ventilators that they need, the equipment, the personnel, and that seems to me a rational response. Your other question, what do we do when you have two doctors who are highly, in many areas, highly regarded, say everybody needs to stay in, regardless of what happens to the economy? Well, at some point, you have to balance and recognize that just as your loved one who's 16, and they need treatment for their cancer, we have got to balance this thing out, and we have to understand, as uncomfortable as it is for me to say this, but to have freedom, there's risk, and we have to acknowledge that sometimes there's going to be risk. Do I advocate being careless? No. Absolutely. Do I advocate being negligent? No. I'm suggesting, though, that I trust the American people, this incredible people who built this incredible country. I fully expect that they can make wise decisions and anticipate that they would not want to spread a public health contagion, but they would act responsibly. But they should be able to make these choices. And so that's what I would advocate. I think we should open up the economy. I think we should tell people to be responsible, truly be responsible. I think all of us have changed patterns in our lives to be more hygienic. The washing of hands, the wearing of masks when we need to wear masks, to keeping social distance. I'm walking down the street in my neighborhood on Sunday, and I see a friend. We stay on the opposite side of the street as we talk. These things, I think, we just have to accept that. I mean, and go forward. But do I advocate, if you are in a vulnerable group, being extra careful? Yes. If you're sick, stay home. If you're in this vulnerable group, find ways to shelter as long as possible, and rarely do you get out in a crowd and whatnot. We are being told ways to avoid community spread. We can do that, I think, and open the economy and be wise. I trust the American people. And with that, Jane, I say thanks for asking the question. We're going to go next to Robert in Gilbert. Robert. Robert, you there?
Hello?
Yeah, Robert, you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, I can. Thanks for calling.
All right. Congressman, thank you for everything you've been doing for us. Mine is more of a comment than a question. The Democrats are very good at getting the word out and bashing anybody they care to. And a lot of this business with all this extra stuff that gets thrown into these bills the word how is there going to be a better way of getting the word out to the constituents of these people who are stonewalling this whole thing? If all these people are just listening to the mainstream media, they're not getting the word. They're only hearing what the Democrats want them to hear. And I think that's the big reason why the mainstream media hates Trump as much as he does, because he bypasses them. He goes direct to the people, so they can't filter him. Only by cutting him out and not broadcasting his things, they're doing that. So how can the Republicans do a better job of letting the people and the public know the things that the Democrats are doing to block all these things so many times?
Well, I appreciate that, Robert. And believe me, I get frustrated as well. I tell all of my colleagues we need to be using every social media tool that we have. We need to use every radio outlet we can, every television outlet. We need to spread the word around that. And even I use, quite frankly, I actually use some print media too to try to get the word out. There's so much noise out there from the other side that really kind of drowns out sometimes our message. But we as they are in the messaging, and I you were very articulate in the way you said that. I'm grateful for that, and I would just say, keep it up. Keep it up. So appreciate the call, Robert. That was a great call. And so now we're going to go next to Rhonda. Rhonda, are you there? Hello, Rhonda. Rhonda, are you there? Sounded like you were there. We might have lost Rhonda. So we'll go next to Karen.
Yes, I'm here.
Hi, Karen. Thank you.
Hi. I think maybe this has been answered. I'm not for sure, but I'll go ahead and ask it. I'm just concerned about if and when our poor little economy gets, or I should say our country gets reopened, do we have these liberal governors? They have been trashing the Constitution and everything, and I was just wondering, is there any way we can rein them in, if it's possible, to get them to follow the Constitution again?
Yeah, great question, Karen. I'm going to offer two solutions. One I mentioned before, and that is, I think the Department of Justice needs to look carefully at these efforts. And so what's happened in the past, when the Department of Justice has seen civil rights abuses, they've gone in and they've found mechanisms to bring an action against a city, a state, whatever, for violating the rights of individuals. And I think that's important. I think what also needs to be done, though, is to take a look at, for instance, in California, where Governor Newsom has announced that they're going to give illegal aliens, I think it was either $500 or $1,500 per, and basically California has refused to cooperate with the federal government on enforcement of a number of laws, and they want us to backfill what they've done to their economy. So here's the way to think. And when I say us, I mean the federal government. And the federal government doesn't have anything. It's the American people that has something. So California basically said, we're going to shut down our economy, and in so shutting the economy, they lose their revenue at the federal, at the state tax level. They lose their state tax revenue. It goes underneath, and they want the federal government to backfill it. So Nancy Pelosi is asking us really for the last bill plus this one coming up, in excess of $300 billion to backfill state governments that shut down their economies. And I think that as long as the federal government does backfill them, then there's no incentive to respect the rights of American citizens, and there's no sense of responsibility that has to be, we're kind of let hook, if you will. So those are the two things I would, Karen, that come to my mind immediately on ways to address these problems. And I really appreciate the call. We're going to go next to Christopher. Christopher, are you there?
This is Chris, yes.
Hi, how are you?
I had the opportunity to go through a prophylactic treatment for malaria on one of the common treatment drugs for malaria, and it was in anticipation of some travel I was doing. And I suffered no side effects on that. I was, I was on it for a while before I left, and then pretty much the duration of my trip. I am very puzzled that, after the French doctor had some success with that there was a lot of hue and cry about methodologies and so on and so forth. And I thought to myself, well, my goodness, if I came down with COVID, I would hope that one of the first questions I would be asked is, have you ever been on a malaria med? And I don't want to name the specific medication for obvious reasons, but when I said yes, they would say, well, would you like to try that? And I certainly would like to try that. And we've had, thank goodness to the Goldwater Institute's efforts, we've had I forget how many states now have a right to try law. So then from a herd perspective on that gives you some subset of folks, and I suspect that a lot of military folks have been on similar regimens. They would have the opportunity to step forward if they did come down with the virus, and if the treatment proved to be successful, even though it wasn't a double blind and with all the methodologies that you would like to have on that from an FDA perspective, if there were considerable curative experiences there, that would be a very good thing to have happen with the situation we're in my opinion. So just wanted to share the observation. And by the way, rather than congratulate you, I'm going to thank you for stepping forward to be in part of the task force to bring the economy back online. That's a big job, but I know you, and you don't step away from big jobs, so thank you.
Thanks, Chris. I really appreciate it. Good to talk to you. So let me talk to you, but just address that real quickly, because I think you're right, and I think the president would like to see this. So here's the way to think of this: the hydroxychloroquine, the anti-malarial drug, is as a phase 1 testing for, which means it's safe for human consumption. It has passed the testing and has been in practice for malaria and other diseases for decades. It has not been approved with the double-blind testing that you're talking about for COVID-19. Of course, that takes usually some time to put that together. There's enough anecdotal evidence that you could use in conjunction with some of the other treatments people have used together that many doctors said seem to be positive. There was a lawmaker in Michigan who said that she took the same regimen and it worked for her after she had contracted COVID-19, and that was the hydroxychloroquine together with zinc, with vitamin C treatments, and using certain Z-Pak erythromycin type of antibiotics. So this is anecdotal evidence. It's not what we would consider double-blind evidence to get you through a phase 2 FDA approval for a drug, but there seems to be some anecdotal evidence that supports this, and I'm with you. Why wouldn't you try this? Why wouldn't you be willing to try this? Because the side effects are minimal. They know who gets affected by these side effects. They can warn. They can make sure that they don't take them. So, great call, Chris. Really, really appreciate it. Next, we're going to go to Lynn in Mesa. Lynn, are you there?
You know what? Why don't you call in and ask a question?
Hey, Lynn. Lynn, you
yes,
there?
Sorry. Hi.
Hi. How are you doing?
Okay. How are you?
Great, thank you.
Okay, so our Our question is, the president just said that there's about 20 states that are ready to start reopening. Are we in that group? And now that you're on this planning committee, how long will it take to put a plan in place so that once we see that the curve is flattening out and we're ready to get going, can the plan be put into place very quickly?
Good question. So Arizona is, I believe, right on the edge of that of the 20. For I can't president phases. I can't remember what all of them are, but I think we're right on the cusp of being ready. I think we're ready today. I think the plan is going to have to include opening up hospitals, particularly to take the decisions on how they're going to respond to surgeries and other than COVID-19 care. I think the second thing is to basically open up the whole economy. Open it up. I mean, you can go to a car dealership, you can go to groceries, you can go to Home Depot and Lowe's. You can go to these places, and we know people can socially distance themselves and behave appropriately to try to keep community spread down. That's what I think what you'll see happen. I think you'll see people say, "Look, let's go on that, and if you need to wear a mask, you wear a mask, and et cetera." I think the last thing that people will be really looking at is bigger things like a concert venue, maybe sporting events. I think those get pushed down a little bit because of the crowds. But even with that, there are ways to skin that cat. That's really politically correct. I shouldn't have said that. There are ways to attack that you can, and that would be. If it's just sporting events, maybe it's every third seat, and maybe people wearing masks at the game, etc. There are ways to do this, and we have just got to acknowledge that Americans are creative, they're ingenious, they want their freedom, they're ready to go back to work, they're ready to participate, and that's really what should happen here. I'm urging our governor, and telling him, let's do it. And I think the president is of a mind that we can get this thing done. In many states, by the way, there are some states that are open for business, that are going great guns right now, and Arizona could and should be one of those. Thank you. Thanks, by the way, Lynn, for that call and the question. Appreciate it very much. Next, we're going to go to Bill.
Yes.
Hi, Bill.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir,
Hi,
I can. Very good, thank you.
First, I want to just thank you for your services, and I appreciate these interviews, these questions very much, and I want to thank you for that.
Appreciate it.
I have a couple of questions. One is, what can we do to give incentives so businesses can come back here from China? Obviously, not all of them are going to come back, but there has to be some kind of incentives passed so we're not so dependent, not just in essential areas like medical supplies and drugs, but in other areas too. And second, I'm in real estate, and one of the things that has been so detrimental to this whole process here is these 3% loans. These are killing people. Because first of all, it's driving up home prices like crazy. I mean, it's great for me. I own a lot of rentals. It's great for me. But it's driving up home prices like it's going out of style. These people that have these loans, they can't afford, because the loan payments are so high and the PMI, they can't afford to put any money away for a rainy day. And part of the reason of that is because corporations are buying back so much of their stock. As an example, all the airlines bought back $39 billion worth of stock. Boeing alone bought back $35 billion worth of stock. Now, all that money is gone. It just got whacked because as that stock prices fell, that money disappeared. That money should have gone into investments, equipment, and wages. Mm-hmm. And it didn't do that. If people had a little higher wages, we could raise how much down payment they have to put on a house. And that's going to lower their house payment, which is going to be very beneficial to them. You know, that law allowing these corporations, one last point, that law allowing these corporations to buy back stock was not legal until 1984. And I don't understand why that's being allowed today. We can see the tremendous damage that it's done to our entire system, financial system. Anyway, that's my question.
Well, Bill, thank you. You've given me three good questions, and so your first question is bringing businesses back from China. One of the things that President Trump did and that Congress did when we had the House and the Senate was the tax package and with some deregulation. We did a whole bunch of deregulation that incentivized some businesses to come back, and many did. But we don't just want them coming back from China. We want them to come back from everywhere, if we can handle that, and I think we can. And you're right. We need to do some tax, some more tax reform and some more regulatory reform. I'll give you a couple ideas of tax reform that would actually stimulate and incentivize folks to come back. And number one would be to reduce the pass-through tax for small corporations and family-owned businesses, because a lot of them went overseas because they couldn't compete with a tax basis that we have here. So that would be great, and it would ease the burden on many of them. Second thing is you could do a cap gains holiday, which would help stimulate capital investment. And the one thing that we do know for certain is this is empirically, it's one of the few tax cuts that has empirically been studied by people all across both spectrums that will tell you that has a direct result in increasing economic activity, and that causes basically a tremendous boom in your economy. That would be fantastic to do that, and I think those are related to each other. Your question gets back to the second question gets to something that was going on when we had the last boom bust house cycle, and that was with the real estate bubble, and that was folks getting in houses that couldn't afford to maintain those houses. It's really tough. We all want people to be able to live the American dream, but sometimes in so doing, we incentivize folks in a way that is detrimental. We provide sometimes perverse incentives, and so we need to probably take a very hard look at that. And so, Bill, thanks very much for the question. A series of questions, appreciate it. And next, we're going to go to Julie in Mesa. Hi, Julie.
Good evening, Congressman. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. I had messaged you earlier today via Facebook with a challenge that a friend and relative is having with getting a PPP loan and unemployment. She is a small business owner. She's actually self-employed, so she's under an LLC, and she's been denied unemployment twice now, and she's not been able to work since March 19th.
They've shut her business down, basically, right? Is that what I understand?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So this is I could talk broadly about it, but I'd rather I would encourage. Let me just ask my folks. Do you have the contact information? So Julie, we have your contact information. Yes. We will get someone to call you, and let's put us in contact with. Is it your friend or your sister? Okay.
This relative, And,
your relative. Okay.
Yeah, she did leave a message today, I think, with Hannah, maybe, this
Okay.
evening.
Yep. That makes sense. So we will get someone to call you, and let's get in communication and see what we can do to help there. So I really appreciate you calling and letting us know that, letting me know, and so let's see what we can do to help out. And my team here tells me we've got your contact information, so we'll make the contact. Very good. Let's now go to Rayanne in Queen Creek.
Hi.
Hi, Rayanne.
Hi. Hello. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for calling in.
My question is basically for the future. If we do get back up and running soon, what's going to happen if we do see an increase in anything, or say flu season comes around next in fall? Is there a risk that our country is going to be shut down like it was this year? Is this something that's going to happen every year? That's my concern, and my concern is it's happened once, so I feel like it's going to keep happening, and I would just like to know your thoughts on that.
So when you say it's happened once, it's going to keep happening, do you mean the shutdown's going to keep happening when we face...
That's what I'm concerned of.
Okay, yeah, right. Great.
Continue happening.
Great. I just want to make sure I understood that. So this is one of the... And you're actually asked the same question that I have asked in probably 3 radio and interviews I did yesterday and today, and that is every year, this year, for instance, the last numbers I saw from CDC is that we had about 36 million Americans contract influenza. We had well over 500,000 Americans hospitalized with influenza, and we lost multiple tens of thousands of people who passed away through complications directly attributable to influenza. And we didn't shut down the economy over that. I am like you. So my question is, is this the pattern? Is this the new pattern when we get to flu season next year? And don't forget, we have a vaccine for flu. Don't forget, we have treatments in place for flu. We've been dealing with that on a regular basis. So the question is, that I've asked some of the medical people that we've been discussing here is, what will we do in the future when we face that epidemic? Because we really do have an epidemic every year of flu. And my fondest hope is that once we get through this and we get this economy up and running again, we basically say, and having lived in Asia, I can tell you when they get to their flu season, if somebody's ill, they stay home. If somebody's concerned or feels particularly vulnerable, they're wearing a mask in public, but they don't shut down their economy. And similarly, I would hope that we might learn some lessons from this so we don't repeat this in the future. That would be my hope. Ray, and that was a great question, and you're thinking along the same way that I'm thinking these days. So next, we're going to go to Heather in Chandler. Heather?
Hello. Hi.
Hi, Heather.
Hi. Hi. Thank you, Congressman Biggs, for getting us all together on a call so that we can be in contact with you and try and understand better what's happening in our country.
You bet. Thank you for calling in.
My question is, great. My question is, so I saw President Trump's guidelines for reopening states, and 2 of the guidelines are, one of them is that healthcare officials, folks who are working in healthcare, have enough PPE or protective equipment to do their jobs. And the second is that there is adequate testing so that anyone who wants a test can get a coronavirus test. What probably we are all hearing is that we have friends, family members, and neighbors who believe that they have coronavirus and they're being turned away at the hospitals. And if we reopen the country or the state, businesses will still need some, and citizens will still need some sense of assurity that they don't have coronavirus. And right now, there's no way for them to get that. We know that there are people who can say, that there are people who can test, they can test their temperature to see if they have a temperature, but that's not an adequate fail-safe to prevent the spread of the virus. People need to know that they have it so that they know for sure that they have to quarantine, and we have to be able to do contact tracing. So when we look at contact tracing and we look at adequate PPE for health folks in the healthcare field, and we look at adequate testing being available for anyone who needs it, are you prepared to open the state of Arizona without those things being in place?
Well, great questions, and fair questions too. So the question that comes to my mind is, how do you get adequate testing? We have 7 million people in Arizona. Are you going to insist that we keep the economy closed until every one of us, 7 million, are tested and can be tested as often as we wish to be tested? If that's the case, we'll never open up. If that's really the case, if the standard is everybody gets to be tested whenever they want to be tested, as often as they want to be tested, this state will never open up. Not only will this state not open up, this country won't open up. Not only will this country not open up, the world will not open up. I think that is a standard that is impossible to meet. We do not do that for any other illness. We simply do not do that for any other illness. I think we need to make the test more widely available. Absolutely. 100% agreement on that. I would also suggest that the PPE issue is also very important. I think you raise a tremendous issue, and I have been in contact with FEMA as well as with DEMA. FEMA is at the federal level, DEMA is at the state level. I've been in contact with hospitals on a regular basis. We need more PPE. We are getting more. More is being manufactured. We have different companies that are now engaged in manufacturing this gear. I think you will see in the next few days more and more distribution coming out on that. I think that is critical as well. And I think that, I think you have to open up your economy, because if you're going to keep your economy closed, you are going to raise and bring in, quite frankly, other social pathologies and illnesses that are going to cause even more damage to individuals and individuals' lives. I think we need to consider those things as well. But boy, I sure appreciate your questions with you. Thanks for joining us. We're going to take now Jim in Mesa. Jim?
Congressman Biggs, yes, thank you.
Thanks for calling in tonight.
You bet. I got kind of I guess my question is this. When we're a year into this and we're in our depression and things aren't going great, what can we do now to curtail the continued infringement of our civil rights? How can we help you?
Well, I think it's very important that we speak out at every level. And I'm going to say this as clearly as I possibly can. I view my office as a congressman as real simply, I don't have power, I have authority. Power is in the people of the United States of America. You have delegated by election some authority to me. That authority is a set of enumerated powers in the Constitution. I can only do certain things. I can't do more than that. But some of our friends who have also been elected have basically used it as to accrete power to their purpose and their ends. I think speaking like this, speaking to your friends, speaking on social media, participating is absolutely critical. I think people like me who you've elected, I need to be talking to the Attorney General of Arizona. I need to be talking to the Department of Justice, where rights are being taken away and infringed, to encourage those people who have that position to basically protect those rights through the executive branch. That is exactly what government's supposed to do: protect our constitutional rights. And let's just keep working that way. Have faith in this country and faith in God. Look, it is an honor for me to serve. I'm grateful that we were able to be on tonight and take a good number of calls. I'm sorry our time has expired. We actually have gone over our time. But I am so grateful to all of you who have called in. I appreciate it. It is an honor to serve. And I really believe and trust in the American people. And the best people in America for me are right here in CD5 in Arizona. And I believe in us. I'm optimistic. I know that we can overcome this tremendous obstacle now. I know that we can protect and preserve our rights. I know that we can get our economy back. We're going to have to work hard to get the economy back. And I know that we can be responsible with our freedoms. And this is a creative country. And I would say to the governors of this country, let the people govern themselves, unleash the American people. And if we do that, I think we're going to be better off for it now and in the long term. Again, thanks for taking time with me tonight. Hopefully we'll do this again here in a not too distant future. Thank you. Have a great evening.